The doorbell rang at 9:37 p.m. on a Friday. Mark Wilson stood frozen, staring at the security camera feed on his phone. There was Sarah, his ex-wife's sister, standing on his porch in the pouring rain, clutching something to her chest. What happened next would change everything, not just for Mark and his 7-year-old daughter Emma, but for everyone involved in ways none of them could have imagined. 2 months earlier, Mark had watched his 8-year marriage collapse in spectacular fashion. His wife Melissa had announced one ordinary Tuesday evening that she needed space to find herself, and was moving to California with her new boyfriend, a yoga instructor she'd met at the resort during what was supposed to be a solo meditation retreat. The divorce was quick, clinical, and devastating. Mark received primary custody of Emma, their daughter, as Melissa admitted she wasn't ready for full-time parenthood while on her journey. Mark's world had narrowed to 2 priorities: his architectural firm, which he now threw himself into with renewed intensity, and Emma, whose quiet confusion broke his heart daily. The little girl had stopped asking when mommy was coming home, but Mark often found her sitting by the window on Sunday afternoons, the time Melissa used to take her for ice cream, just watching the street. The Wilson family had fractured along predictable lines after the divorce. Melissa's parents and brothers had essentially disappeared from their lives, uncomfortable with the messy reality of divided loyalties. Only Sarah, Melissa's younger sister by 5 years, had reached out occasionally with texts checking on Emma. Mark had always liked Sarah. She was the sensible one in the family, a pediatric nurse with a no-nonsense attitude and genuine warmth that Emma had always responded to. But even those messages had stopped about 3 weeks ago. Until tonight. "Sarah?" Mark said, pulling open the door. "What are you?" "I'm sorry to show up like this," she interrupted, water dripping from her dark hair. "I know it's late, but..." She shifted what she was holding, and Mark realized it was a thick manila envelope. "Can I come in? It's important." Mark stepped aside, noticing how exhausted she looked. Her normally bright eyes were shadowed, her shoulders hunched against more than just the rain. "Is Emma asleep?" Sarah asked, glancing toward the stairs. "Yeah, she's been down since 8. What's going on? Is Melissa okay?" Sarah's laugh was hollow. "Melissa is fine. Thriving in her new life, according to Instagram." She placed the envelope on the kitchen counter. "This isn't about her." "Well, not directly." Mark felt a familiar knot form in his stomach. Every time he thought he'd processed the divorce, something new emerged to reopen the wound. "Should I be sitting down for this?" "Maybe we both should," Sarah said. They settled at the kitchen table, the envelope between them like a bomb neither wanted to touch. "I found something," Sarah began, her voice steady despite her obvious discomfort. "I was helping Mom clean out the attic last weekend, and I came across some old papers of Dad's. He was always so organized, keeping everything in those labeled boxes." Mark nodded. His former father-in-law's meticulous nature was legendary in the family. "There was a box marked Family Medical, and I was going through it because I thought it might have our childhood vaccination records. Mom's been wanting to digitize everything." Sarah placed her hand on the envelope. "Instead, I found these." She slid the envelope toward Mark, who opened it with growing apprehension. Inside were medical documents, letters, and what appeared to be legal papers. As he scanned the first page, his confusion deepened. "These are fertility clinic records," he said, looking up at Sarah. "Keep reading," she urged quietly. As Mark continued through the documents, the story emerged in clinical black and white. 15 years ago, his former father-in-law had been diagnosed with a condition that would eventually render him infertile. He and his wife had decided to use a sperm donor for their second child, Sarah. "You're not biologically related to Melissa," Mark said slowly, processing the information. "Or to my parents, at least not to my dad," Sarah confirmed. "I'm the product of donor number 7293. She gave a small, sad smile. Explains why I was always the odd one out, doesn't it? The only brunette in a family of blondes. The only one interested in science instead of business. Mark sat back, stunned. Does Melissa know? No one knows except my parents. And now you. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. I confronted them, of course. Mom cried. Dad got angry that I'd been snooping. They begged me not to tell anyone, said it would disrupt the family unnecessarily. That's a lot to process, Mark said gently. But Sarah, why are you telling me this? We're not even family anymore, technically. Sarah took a deep breath. Because of what else I found. She reached into the envelope and pulled out another document, this one newer. After I discovered the truth, I did what anyone would do, I ran a DNA test. I wanted to know where I came from, if I had half-siblings out there. Mark felt a chill run down his spine as she pushed the paper toward him. I do have a half-sibling, Sarah said, her eyes never leaving his face. You. The kitchen seemed to tilt around Mark as he stared at the DNA results showing a 25% match between Sarah and himself. That's impossible, he whispered. Your father was donor number 7293, Mark. He donated while in medical school. The dates, the location, it all fits. I double-checked everything before coming here. Mark's father had died when he was 12, a brilliant surgeon taken too early by an aneurysm. The man who had taught him to fish, who had built elaborate blanket forts in the living room, who had instilled in him a love of precision and detail that led to his career in architecture, that man had unknowingly connected him to his ex-wife's family in a way that defied comprehension. Emma, Mark said suddenly. This means you're actually her biological aunt. Not just by marriage. Sarah nodded, tears finally spilling over. That's why I'm here. I couldn't stay away knowing she's my blood. And you're my brother, Mark. Half-brother, technically, but still. We're family in a way that has nothing to do with Melissa. The revelation hung between them, enormous and transformative. Does anyone else know you're here? Mark asked. No. My parents think I'm at a conference in Denver. Melissa hasn't spoken to me since I questioned her about leaving Emma. Sarah wiped her eyes. I don't know what to do with this information, but I couldn't keep it from you. Emma deserves to know she has family who are connected to her by more than just a marriage that failed. Mark stood up abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the rain-slicked street. His mind raced through memories, family gatherings where he and Sarah had gravitated toward each other in conversation, both slightly apart from the louder Wilson clan, the strange sense of familiarity he'd felt upon meeting her, how Emma had always adored her Aunt Sarah, with an intensity that seemed to transcend the usual niece-aunt relationship. Me too, Sarah said. I thought it was just because we both liked the same books, or because you didn't try to dominate every conversation like my brothers. But maybe it was something else. Something in our DNA recognizing itself. Mark turned back to her. What do you want, Sarah? From us? I want to be in Emma's life. And yours, if you'll let me. She stood up, her posture straightening as if shedding a burden. I'm not asking to move in or disrupt what you've built here. But maybe dinner once a week? The occasional weekend outing? Emma needs a female presence in her life who isn't going to disappear. The simple truth of her words hit Mark with unexpected force. Emma did need that. And perhaps he needed something too, a connection to family that wasn't tainted by betrayal. Stay tonight, he found himself saying. The guest room is made up. Emma will be thrilled to see you at breakfast. We can figure out the rest tomorrow. Sarah's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. Thank you, she whispered. Neither of them could have predicted how that rainy night would set in motion a chain of events that would heal not just Emma's wounded heart, but their own as well. The next morning, Emma's squeal of delight upon finding her aunt at the breakfast table was the first genuinely happy sound Mark had heard from his daughter in months. As he watched them together, Sarah helping Emma make pancakes shaped like animals, both laughing as the batter dripped onto the counter, Mark felt something shift inside him. A door that had been firmly closed since Melissa's departure cracked open, allowing in a sliver of hope. Over the following weeks, Sarah became a regular presence in their lives. Sunday afternoons, once the most painful reminder of Melissa's absence, transformed into adventure days, where Sarah would take Emma to museums, parks, or simply for walks where they collected interesting rocks and leaves. Mark often joined them, discovering parts of his own city he'd never explored despite living there for years. The arrangement benefited everyone. Emma blossomed under the additional attention, her nightmares becoming less frequent. Mark found himself able to focus better at work, knowing Emma had another adult who truly cared about her well-being. And Sarah, who had always wanted children but hadn't found the right partner, got to experience the joy of helping raise a child who shared her blood. They decided to keep the DNA connection private for the time being, telling Emma simply that Aunt Sarah missed her and wanted to spend more time together. The truth would come later, when Emma was old enough to understand its complexities. 3 months after Sarah's rainy night revelation, the inevitable happened. Melissa called. "I hear my sister has basically moved into my house," she said without preamble when Mark answered the phone. "She hasn't moved in," Mark replied calmly. "She spends time with Emma, which is more than can be said for some people." The barb landed. Melissa's video calls with Emma had dwindled from weekly to monthly, each one shorter than the last as her new life consumed her attention. "Don't get sanctimonious with me, Mark. Sarah's always been jealous of what I had. First she tries to steal my parents' attention, and now she's trying to replace me with Emma." Mark bit back his first response. "Nobody is replacing you, Melissa. You're Emma's mother. But she needs female role models who are actually present in her life. Whatever. Just tell Sarah to back off. It's weird and inappropriate." After hanging up, Mark immediately called Sarah to warn her about the conversation. To his surprise, she laughed. "Let her be angry," Sarah said. For once in her life, Melissa isn't getting exactly what she wants, total freedom with no consequences. She wants to abandon her responsibilities but still control who fills the gap she left. "She might call your parents," Mark warned. "Let her. I'm a 32-year-old woman. I don't need permission to spend time with my niece." There was a pause. "Besides, I told them the truth last week." "About us? About the DNA?" "Yes. They didn't take it well, especially Dad. He accused me of trying to destroy the family." Sarah's voice hardened. "I told him the family was already fractured, and I was simply finding my real one." The confrontation with the Wilsons came to a head at Thanksgiving. Despite the tension, Sarah had convinced Mark to accept her parents' invitation, arguing that Emma deserved to maintain relationships with all her grandparents. What was intended as a peace offering devolved quickly into accusations and tears. "You had no right to go digging into private matters," Mr. Wilson thundered at Sarah across the elegantly set dining table. "And you had no right to lie to me for 32 years, Sarah shot back. "I had a right to know where I came from." "We are where you came from," Mrs. Wilson cried. "We raised you, loved you, gave you everything." "Except the truth," Sarah said quietly. Emma, sensing the tension, pressed herself against Mark's side. He placed a protective arm around her shoulders. "And now you've dragged Mark into this delusion," Mr. Wilson continued, gesturing dismissively. "Some coincidental DNA match doesn't make you siblings. It doesn't make you family." "Actually," Mark said, speaking for the first time, "family is exactly what it makes us." Blood or not, Sarah has been more family to Emma in the past few months than anyone at this table. The silence that followed was deafening. "I think it's time we left," Mark said, standing and taking Emma's hand. "Thank you for dinner." As they walked to the car, Emma looked up at her father and aunt with solemn eyes. "Are you and Aunt Sarah really brother and sister?" she asked. Mark and Sarah exchanged glances over the child's head. "Yes, sweetheart," Sarah answered gently. "We just found out recently. It's complicated grown-up stuff, but it means I'm really your aunt, not just because I was your mom's sister." Emma considered this for a moment. "Is that why you make the same face as Daddy when you're thinking really hard?" Sarah laughed, surprised. "Do we?" "Uh-huh. You both get all scrunchy right here," Emma said, pointing between her eyebrows. The simple observation, so obvious to a child, so overlooked by adults, broke the tension. By the time they arrived home, the three of them were laughing about other similarities they'd never noticed, the way both Mark and Sarah organized their bookshelves by color, their shared inability to whistle, their mutual hatred of cilantro. Christmas approached, bringing with it a new set of challenges. Melissa announced she would be coming home for the holidays, expecting to stay in what had once been her house. Mark, after consultation with his lawyer, agreed to stay with a friend so she could have time with Emma in familiar surroundings. Sarah offered her apartment to him, saying she would stay with a nursing colleague. The arrangement seemed workable until Melissa arrived 2 days before Christmas with unexpected news. "I'm moving back," she announced as she unpacked her suitcase in the guest room. "Not here, obviously. But back to the city." The California experiment didn't work out. Mark felt a complex mix of emotions, concern for Emma's stability, wariness about Melissa's intentions, and, surprisingly, a complete absence of the longing he once would have felt at such news. "What about your journey of self-discovery?" he asked, unable to keep the edge from his voice. Melissa shrugged, avoiding his eyes. "Turns out the self I discovered wasn't as interesting as I hoped. And Diego," she named the yoga instructor, "wasn't exactly supportive once the retreat atmosphere wore off." "I'm sorry it didn't work out," Mark said, and found he genuinely meant it. "What are your plans?" "I've got a job interview at Bellman's after the new year. They need a marketing director." She finally looked at him directly. "I want to be part of Emma's life again. A real part, not just video calls and holiday visits." "That's between you and Emma," Mark said carefully. "She's missed you terribly." "And I've missed her," Melissa said, her voice softening. "More than I expected to. Nothing felt right without her." The conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. Sarah stood on the porch, holding a brightly wrapped package. "Sorry to intrude," she said when Mark opened the door. "I just wanted to drop off Emma's gift before I head to Jenna's for the week." Mark invited her in, ignoring Melissa's visible stiffening at the kitchen counter. "Sarah," Melissa acknowledged coolly. "Melissa," Sarah returned with equal frost. "Welcome back." The tension between the sisters was palpable as Sarah placed her gift under the tree. Emma, hearing Sarah's voice, came thundering down the stairs and launched herself into her aunt's arms. "You're not staying for Christmas?" Emma asked, dismayed. "Not this year, pumpkin. Your mom is here, and you two have lots of catching up to do." Sarah hugged the little girl tightly. "But I'll see you for New Year's, okay? We'll make those constellation cookies you like." Emma looked between her mother and her aunt, clearly torn. "Can't everybody stay? There's room." The three adults exchanged uncomfortable glances. "It's complicated, sweetheart," Mark began. "Why?" "Mommy's in the guest room. You could have your room, and Aunt Sarah could sleep on the pull-out couch like she did when I was sick." The simple logic of a child laid bare the adult absurdity of the situation. Before anyone could formulate a response, Emma continued. "Please. It's Christmas. Ms. Abernathy says Christmas is about family being together." In that moment, looking